Hey Warthog builders, today I want to talk about the steering on the Warthog. One of the reasons I built the Warthog was to enter it into local competitions. And I think that two qualities that a competition truck has to have, even a small one like this, are good steering and a narrow track width. The track width on the Warthog is, it's reasonable, but it has terrible steering. I think everybody knows that the SCX24 doesn't have great steering to begin with, and because the Warthog is actually wider than the stock chassis and it has its shocks laid down horizontally, that the steering is even worse. And of course that's why everybody who builds a Warthog immediately turns around and widens their truck up, turn the wheels inside out, put +6, +4 axles in it, whatever. And that'll solve the problem. But I'm not going to widen my Warthog at all. But I do want to get my steering back. And I realized that the only way to get it back was to move that shock out of the way. So I started to look at mounting locations for the shock. And for whatever reason, I had the terrible idea of moving the shock up to the top of the chassis here. So what I did was I designed this little tab here into the chassis rail and a couple of holes, and I mounted the shock up there, and it took about 3 seconds for me to realize that that was an epic fail, because what it did was it put the shock at full extension and I had no more travel. And I had obviously no articulation either, so that was a pretty bad idea. And then I started to look more in this area between these two screws, and I was looking at how the truck sat at rest and how I needed the shocks to move, and also how far out of the way I needed the shock to be to clear the tire. And I decided to give this location right here between the two screws a try. And I am very happy to say that so far, at least, I think that that's going to be the permanent home for the shock on the Warthog. And here are the reasons. First of all, the Warthog right now at rest sits level, and it's actually exactly the way that it sits with the shock in the horizontal laid down position. So I've got a level chassis, and I've also got that maximum low CG that we all love about the Warthogs. Secondly, I got my shock extension, my shock travel, and my articulation back. In fact, I got, in my opinion, too much travel. In this position, you get the full 10 millimeters or so of travel, but I felt like that was too much. So I put a little limiting washer on the bottom of the shock shaft, and I limited my travel to 6 millimeters. And for me, at least, that seems a little bit more reasonable. And front and rear, it seems like it's about the same. And then thirdly, and most importantly, I got the shock out of the way, and I'll show you that in just a second. But I think that this is going to be the location that the shock is going to stay in on the Warthog here for a while. So let's take a look at the clearance. So you may notice that I've got two different tires on here. I've got the smaller Wranglers, and then I've got the bigger Little Guy Racing Trail King MTs, so they're pretty big. And what I'm going to do now is turn the steering full lock this way. So I'm turning it until it can't turn anymore, which means that the hub is up against the axle. And by the way, I know that you can shave your axle and get more steering, and I may do that now that I've got all that clearance, but I have not done that yet. So here's the clearance with the steering at full compression, or with the suspension at full compression. As you can see, plenty of room. Now here it is at full articulation, so this side's extended and this side is compressed. Still plenty of room. Now we'll go to the other side and go full lock the other way. That's all the way. And here it is at steering or suspension fully compressed. And then here it is with steering at full compression. And here you can see that it does in fact hit a little bit, and for now I'm okay with that. And in all honesty, I'm not planning to run these big tires right off the bat. I'm going to start out with the smaller ones and see how it does. But even if I did run these big tires, I may not actually back off on the steering endpoints, even though it does hit a little bit. I would probably want to run it and test it to see if, you know, there's that sort of 1 in a million chance that you're going to get in such a position that the shock, you know, that the tire is actually pushed into the shock and causes any kind of binding. But anyway, that's a decision that you make over time. The point is that even with the big tires, I have pretty much all of my steering back. Well, I definitely have it all back because it's already locked to lock. So big tire or small tire, you know, I've got enough clearance to get all of my steering back. And as I said, by shaving those axle housings, I could even get a little bit more. As of right now, I think that's where the shock is going to stay. I think it's a good compromise between other positions, and you know, not widening the truck but getting that shock out of the way, and it seems to work really good. If you can think of anything that would make that a bad location, please let me know in the comments, because you know, I'm not a guru of any kind. I'm just doing what I think is best. So if you can think of anything that I may have overlooked, please let me know. Also, if you have gotten your steering back on your Warthog without widening it and by moving the shock, let me know how you did it, because I might want to experiment with that myself. One other tip I wanted to give you was that if you are thinking about, you know, drilling holes in your chassis, you may want to consider making a little template like this. I did this because I'm really bad at guessing holes, and I wanted it to be the same, in the exact same position side to side, so I made this little template. And what it does is it allows me to take that shock off, and then I can just lay this template up against the chassis, and it allows me to get my 2 holes in exactly the same spot, left and right. So you know that, you know, you don't have to have a 3D printer to do that. You can make one out of, you know, paper if you had to. But anyway, so I hope this is interesting, and like I said, you know, let me know what you did to get your steering back on your Warthog.